the densest bodybuilder of all time, the densest. Stay tuned. I'm going to let you know who that is. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RXMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. We are now 4.5 weeks out from the Olympia. We have begun our Iron Road to the Olympia series. We have a couple of interviews in the can, as well as upcoming episodes of Iron Debate. So we're going to be bringing up some of your favorites. Analysis, preview segments, everything in the works, everything that you come to expect from us pre-Olympia. And then, of course, on the weekend of the Olympia, we're going to have wall-to-wall coverage of the show, stuff around town, behind-the-scenes features that we're planning for you. Dave's going to be there in person again. Chris Aceto, whoever else that we bump into. Of course, you know our final wrap-up is going to be an epic Who's Who affair. So again, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss anything we have planned for you over the course of the next few weeks, and then leading into Olympia weekend. We're going to go right into the questions. We have a lot of questions to get to. The first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question: do you think that while on your keto diet, beef, chicken, and turkey help retain muscle better than eggs, fish, or whey isolate, assuming protein and fats are the same? As much as I love the convenience of egg whites and whey isolate with my busy schedule, I can't help but think I maintain better strength and fullness while I make myself get most of my protein from meat and poultry. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the protein sources of animals are pretty comparable in terms of, like, if you needed to use only, eggs and when I say eggs, I mean whole eggs, usually eggs and whey, you probably can get the same benefit as if eating meats. I think what happens is that when you eat like red meat or you eat chicken, you're getting a lot more fat in there. And you do need some saturated fat. A lot of people don't eat enough saturated fat. It's funny because I'm always advocating, monounsaturated fats from like olive oil and avocados and macadamia nut oil, because they're the cleanest burning, healthiest fats for your heart. And I advocate, your essential fatty acids, which are your polyunsaturates, the omega-3s, fish oils, omega-6s, your evening primrose oil, borage oils. They're really important. But you do need saturated fats too, with some cholesterol, believe it or not. That's the building blocks of all the steroidal hormones in your body. So a lot of times when guys will eat, diets that are like eggs and fish and whey protein, there's not a lot of saturated fat. There's almost no saturated fat in those. So you sometimes feel weaker because you're actually depriving yourself of one of the categories of fat that your body needs. Now, it doesn't need an exorbitant amount of saturated fat, obviously, but it needs some. So that's why I think when people have restrictive type protein sources, and that's why I like to vary my protein sources, they sometimes feel like something's not right. And then they'll switch to more chicken and red meat, and they're like, oh man, I feel so much better. Well, of course you do, because you were deficient before. Just like if you ate no good fats, and then so a lot of times guys come to me and they're like, they only eat like, they don't even put fats in their diet. They just get whatever they get from the red meat and chicken they eat. And then I put them on all these essential fats and monounsaturates, and they're like, I feel so great. Their body changes and they get lean and they have this amazing skin tone. It's because they're deficient in it. So you don't want to be deficient in anything. So that's why it's not a good idea to eat a very restrictive diet. You want to vary the protein sources, you want to vary the fat sources, and you want to, carbs really don't matter as much, but you definitely want to vary the essential ingredients, which is protein and fat. And that's why people feel that way.
Second question, again, these two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Back day question: is it better to start back day with deadlifts or end with deadlifts?
Yes. The answer is yes, because switch it around. You know what I mean? I've done it both ways. You definitely are a little bit stronger when you start with deadlifts, obviously, because you're not fatigued from the whole back workout. But you know what? I found that if you deadlift at the end of the back workout, because you're so warmed up, you're not that much weaker. So a lot of times I used to do it at the end, just because if I can do the same weight at the end that I can do in the beginning, I might as well do it at the end, right? Sometimes it's nice to get it over with because it's an intense type of situation where you're lifting super heavy weight off the floor. It's uncomfortable. You're sweating. Your heart is racing. But what I find is if you mix it up a little bit, it shocks your body. So sometimes do it before in the beginning. Sometimes do it after. Sometimes I would do it as a second exercise. I might do pull downs first, get a little warmed up, then do deads, then go to my rowing movements, and then finish and then just finish the workout with the machines. Sometimes I would go right to do the whole workout and then just finish up with deadlifts at the end. And I didn't notice a much of a difference in my strength. But then again, I'm not lifting I wasn't lifting for maximum weights. You know what I mean? If you were a deadlifter or if you're competing in deadlifting, you obviously wouldn't want to do it at the end of the workout. But for bodybuilding purposes, I think it's fine. Just don't let your form deteriorate, because sometimes when you get tired, you're not gonna go all the way down. You're not gonna squat, drop those legs down and drive from the glutes and the legs in the beginning of the workout, in the beginning of the movement rather. So it depends on how you feel. I also didn't do 30 sets for back. I only did 15 sets. So I wasn't as fatigued by the time I got to deadlifts. The good thing is if you do them at the end, you don't have to warm up. I would go from doing my whole backward. I go to deadlifts. I do 4 plates. I put on there and do them for 6, 7 reps. And then I would go to 5 plates on each side, and I would do them for 4 reps. And that was it. If you do them in the beginning, you have to build up. You have to do 135, 225, 315, 405. You got to build up to your weight because otherwise you'll get hurt. So there is an advantage to doing them at the end. But I don't think it really matters. These 2 questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app are really good questions, and these are indicative of the kind of questions that we get from the app members. If you download the Dave Palumbo Experience app from the iTunes store or the Android store, it's $29 a month. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. You get all my writings I've ever done, all my videos in one place, well categorized. We put up a workout every week. I answer everyone's questions in the app. So you see everyone's questions, everyone's answers. It's a good learning experience. I even do a Q&A video every single week. So it's like an extra Ask Dave just for the app members. It's a really good learning experience. People really seem to like it. And, it's you never want to stop learning. And what it forces you to do is constantly see new questions asked, get new answers. As things get updated, I do new stuff that maybe you didn't hear me do before. All my protocols are in there, off-season, pre-contest diets and cycles and all that stuff. So it's a really good resource for information. And a lot of you guys have been, I don't know, maybe because now that the summer's over, a lot of people signed up over the last 2 months. We have a really good amount of people now on the app, and I want to thank you guys for the support.
Let's go to our Facebook and Instagram questions. Again, if you're not following us on Facebook, just go into the search bar, type in RX Muscle, on Instagram, official_RX Muscle. I'm glad this person asked this question because you're starting to see a lot more people very open about just walking, right? Just getting their steps in every day, bodybuilders, non-bodybuilders. There are a lot of people that use weighted, sometimes like a vest, sometimes a belt, but they're using some sort of a weight mechanism while going on the walks. Your thoughts on these weighted mechanisms?
I think you should just put on 10 pounds of muscle and then you don't have to put a weighted vest on. That's the best way to, first of all, I'm not into the whole people who are tracking it's too neurotic for me. how many steps did I get per day? I see people, they're like walking up and down their driveway to get the extra 100 steps and to get them to 10,000 every day. You know what? To me, it's kind of a joke. First of all, you can't count that as cardio. Yes, you're moving, and it's good that you're moving around. And obviously, we don't want to be sloths. But I personally would rather sit on the couch all day and go to the gym and weight train and do 30 minutes of cardio. I think that's more effective than walking around all day intermittently, because you're not doing any. Most people who walk a lot of steps are not doing it continuously. They're just on their feet a lot. If anything, it's just causing overtraining, and it's actually breaking down your legs too much. To me, specific sessions of exercise are way more important and potent in producing the result we want. It's like called controlled theory, right? You exercise briefly, whether it be an hour or whatever, and intensely, and then you rest. And that's how bodybuilders, make progress. We don't weight train for 5 hours, 6 hours a day, all throughout the day. Hey, I'm going to do a set now. I'm going to go back in 20 minutes and do another 5 set. You don't do that, because that would make your body constantly be breaking itself down, and it would never have time to rebuild itself. So I'm not a huge fan of like worrying about steps. Now, for the average, person who doesn't do anything, it's probably better than nothing, but it's not really good for people who are looking to get a performance boost out of things. And as far as weight vests go, I don't see the advantage of stressing your body. Like, in other words, they tell you lose weight if you're too heavy, right? Because it's too stressful to your heart. So what do people do? They go and strap a 20-pound weight vest on their back, and they go walk around with it. I mean, it just doesn't seem to be. It's not gonna make you be in better shape. It's just gonna strain your body more. I would think that if you can walk faster, okay, and if you can move better without that extra weight on you, you're going to get a better exercise session in. I don't know. That's just me, though. I just think that people want to make everything harder, and they think that that's going to make it better necessarily, and I don't necessarily agree with that. So once again, plan your cardio sessions for specific times. Try to rest in between workouts. Don't be trying to work out all day, or you're just going to accomplish nothing.
There was a question about pre-contest, and I mean literally pre-contest, before you go on stage. Somebody asked, would an enema or a suppository help in terms of helping you get rid of a gut before you go on stage?
Ask Greg Valentino. He's the expert on enemas for sure. Now, you know what? We used to do that back in the 90s. We used to buy these like Deucelex suppositories. You stick up your butt and help you go to the bathroom. But you know what? That was before we knew about fiber. Once I discovered fiber, it was like a miracle, because I never had a problem going anymore. Now with my Fiberlize product that I developed over the last 12 years, women and men, I tell people the day before the show. Most people take it twice a day, and then the day before the show, I have them do it 3 times. So they don't have a problem going to the bathroom anymore, because the fiber keeps everything moving. And even if you don't get that last bowel movement in right before you get on stage, because maybe you have an early prejudging, it doesn't even matter, because you're not really retaining a lot of fecal matter anyway, because you're going so regularly with the fiber. So the key with bodybuilding in general is to get the waste out of your body as quickly as possible and as effortlessly as possible. And what you'll find is if you use a fiber supplement like Fiberlize twice a day regularly, you'll never have a lot in there to begin with. And when you start carving up at the end, it's going to move that stuff out of there as well. You have to use the way we eat, okay, as bodybuilders. We do not eat a lot of fiber in our diet. And even if we try to make an effort to eat fruits and vegetables, which we're not going to do because they're wasted calories, essentially, there's not a lot of soluble fiber in those things. You need a concentrated form of soluble fiber. Psyllium being the best one. And there's different grades of psyllium. And I've talked about this many times in our videos. We use at Species Nutrition the highest swell rate psyllium that money can buy. It's very expensive. It's the most expensive psyllium available. Matter of fact, my manufacturer tells me no one uses this. You're the only one who uses it. I'm like, good, I'm glad, because I want to be the only one to use it, because that makes my product the best. And yet, if my product's a little more expensive than the other ones, I can justify it because I know I have the best product out there. And so when you use a high swell rate psyllium, okay, you're never going to be constipated, and it just doesn't happen. So you don't have to do these little tricks at the last minute. Because when you shove stuff up your butt, whether it be water, enemas, with other minerals in it that try to draw out stuff, or even using like these little Deucelix suppositories, it causes inflammation in your gut. So sometimes you can poop, but then your gut's like kind of like still like swollen a little bit, and you don't know why. And it's because the gut gets irritated by these enemas. You don't want to have to do that. You want your body to just be effortlessly, eliminating waste. And so don't wait till the last minute. Do this on a regular basis, and you will thank me, I promise you.
Let's go to Brad Brisbane. Here's an important topic. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 2 left ventricular heart failure. My ejection fraction was reduced to 25%. This was the result of long-term Tren use and other AAS. I've since been on a pharmaceutical-based heart failure treatment program at Kaiser. I managed to improve my EF to 45% while remaining on HRT, and most recently ramping up for a show prep. Tren is a hot topic right now among many young bodybuilders. It's essentially become normalized. Maybe if you could address proper cycling techniques as well as hedging side effects.
Well, first of all, I don't think you can necessarily say the Tren caused my heart issue. Okay, probably not. That's probably not the case. Now, I will say this, and I've talked about this before, and I don't know his particular case. I don't know if he had symptoms or if he just went in for an echocardiogram and his cardiologist said, "Hey, your ejection fraction is down to 25%. We got to do something about it." And he might not have felt anything. He might have felt great. Athletic hearts can appear to sometimes be damaged hearts because the cardiac output, the amount of blood that left ventricle pumps out when it squeezes, is reduced a lot of times in big bodybuilders. Why? Because we need the blood delivered so quickly to the muscles, okay, that the heart thickens itself and makes itself stronger. But it's doing that not because there's something wrong with the heart, because we're putting such a demand on the heart. We're like saying, we need to squat 600 pounds. I need blood in those quad muscles fast. Well, if the body is going to deliver that blood doubly as fast as it normally would, that means the heart has to be thicker, but it's not going to deliver as much blood, but it will deliver it faster. And that's the key. Okay, so an athletic heart is a heart that might appear that it's not functioning properly because it's delivering less blood per squeeze, but it's delivering that blood much quicker. And it's all because the heart gets thicker. Now, if you don't work out and you have a thickened, enlarged heart, it means because under normal situation, the heart can't provide blood fast enough to the body, so the heart gets bigger. That's a pathological heart. That's a damaged heart. It's the body can't get the blood circulating in a normal state, and it gets enlarged. So it appears to be the same situation, right? Because the heart's thicker, it's squeezing less blood out, but they're caused by two different situations. One's self-caused, one's induced by a disease state in the body. So and the evidence for this is, I see this all the time. Guys get diagnosed with this. They have no symptoms. The doctor says you're going to die. You have a 25%, cardiac output, ejection fraction. And they put them on all this medication to relax the heart, beta blockers, and sometimes, aldactone, which reduces fluid retention in the heart. And they get them off all the drugs, which make the heart obviously get thicker, just like all the other muscles. And then the heart relaxes, and it detrains itself. It basically atrophies because it's a muscle, and it gets smaller, the heart, and it gets less thick because it's not being used as much because the beta blockers are preventing it from being overtaxed. And then all of a sudden they go from 25% to 45% ejection fraction. How does that happen if the heart's damaged? If you're in heart failure, it's impossible to improve double your cardiac output, okay, if the heart was that damaged. All it's doing is you're causing a detraining effect on the heart. Now, I'm not telling you not to do this. I'm not telling you to listen to your physician. What I'm telling you is that when you bodybuild at a very high level, you're going to see an athletic heart. And it doesn't mean you have that the heart's bad. You have to differentiate. Now, if you have damaged valves, or you have blockages in your coronary arteries, or you actually feel terrible because of what's going on in your heart, that's a different story. But for most bodybuilders, if you go to get an echocardiogram, you're going to have a thickened heart and you're going to have a reduced ejection fraction because of that. And it's important to know why and to understand this. If you have clear coronary arteries on a cardiac CT scan and you feel good and you're doing great stuff in the gym, just because the doctor's telling you, hey, this is what I'm measuring, doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. And I think that doctors, once again, have to understand that the difference between the athlete versus the regular person. There's going to be anomalies on blood work. There's going to be anomalies on echocardiograms and probably on EKGs too. Once again, it doesn't mean that you should Dave said I could dismiss it. It doesn't matter. I'm a bodybuilder. No, it doesn't mean that. Now, getting back to the Tren question, Tren, deca, EQ, any anabolic steroid can cause the same effect. They build muscle. And if you push your heart hard in the gym because you're trying to squat and deadlift and bench press and bent over row, the heart will respond like a muscle and get bigger and stronger and thicker. That's what it does. And steroids will make that effect more. That's why bodybuilders on steroids have thicker hearts than bodybuilders who don't take steroids, because the steroids are helping the heart get bigger faster, just like they're doing to the skeletal muscle. Now, if you took steroids and you didn't work out that hard, okay, you probably wouldn't see that heart effect. They don't just make muscle grow. You have to stress the muscle to make it grow. So this is an important distinction. And once again, I'm not telling you to dismiss what the doctor says, but understand that you might not actually be in heart failure, okay, the way they're describing you, if you're just an athlete.
Let's go to MacGyver's rusty pocket knife. Good to have him back in the fold. Do you think GH caused Lee Priest's head to go? He says go. I don't know if he meant grow like it is now.
Grow.
His ears and nose seem to be a lot bigger than they used to be. So I don't know if he's trolling us. I know the other channel that Lee does content for, they often will do some altered images of Lee, his ears, his nose, or whatever like that. Have you noticed anything different about Lee's ears and nose?
I actually think that Lee is an orc from the Lord of the Rings. He's been hiding it all these years, and now it's finally, his genetics are finally coming out, and we're realizing that. Yeah, I don't think it's GH use. I think it's just his alien DNA that is finally revealing itself to us. I knew he was a little too handsome when he was younger. I knew something was being hidden from us, and I knew he was just a little too muscular, for his own good. And now we're seeing the true Lee come out, and that's the truth. And you know what the funny thing is? The funny thing is, it's not even being caused by growth hormone. It's just being caused by his alien DNA being expressed. And he's been sending me some of his medical scans, and I knew from looking at them. I didn't want to tell him, but yeah, I saw that there was some alien weird things going on in there that just don't exist. His heart, I think, has a fifth chamber as opposed to four chambers, and that's probably why he's got so much energy, because he has extra blood pumping capacity. Now, you know what the truth is? Lee doesn't even use GH. That's the funny thing. But you know what? As we get older, nose and ears continue to grow. That's why you ever see these really old people, they got really big noses or really big ears a lot of times. That the cartilage in your body never stops growing. And so as we get older, there's nothing you can really do about it, but they will get larger and larger and larger. Once again, I think Lee has probably used GH probably less than any other bodybuilder that I actually know. Probably most likely because he doesn't like to spend the money on it because it is expensive. He'd rather buy a new car. But yeah, it sucks getting old. We all start falling apart and start looking weird and all that stuff. But there's always plastic surgery, so we can always take care of it. Lee will get his ears trimmed and his nose cut off at some point. I'm sure. We'll see. He's already done what? His eyes. He did his eyes, and what else has he done? He got his eyes fixed. He's always getting tattoos removed. I think he's just resurfacing his skin, but it's tough for a very good-looking man to get old. Trust me. Luckily, I never was good-looking, so it doesn't matter. I'm getting better looking as I get older, I think. So.
So with that, Francis Kantz wants to know who are some of the most dense bodybuilders of all time. How does one, then I guess the secondary to that, how does one improve their overall muscular density?
The two most dense, but I think that the densest bodybuilder with the most grainy, dense, thick muscle was probably Dorian Yates that I've ever seen. And you know what? You couldn't appreciate him unless you saw him in person, because what he put on stage at whatever he was, 150, 255, 260, he could have been 20 pounds heavier than that, but he wanted to bring that grainy, gnarly muscle to the stage, and he did. And it was in person, it was unbelievable to see how thick he was, because he trained so hard and so heavy that the muscle looked like girders, steel girders. That's how dry he and grainy he was. Ronnie was close, but Ronnie's even. I mean, Ronnie had like more of a billowy look to his muscle. Like it was a little. It wasn't quite as like grainy and gnarly as Dorian's. He had great separation in the muscle fibers and everything like that, because he also trained super heavy and did that. But to me, Dorian Yates was the pinnacle of like, holy mackerel, that guy. No one trains harder than that guy. Look at that physique he built. It's like steel. There was not you couldn't find anything soft on his body at all when he would step on that stage. So to me, that was the pinnacle. And that's what I always aspired to be. I always saw Dorian's physique and I said, you know what, that's what I want to look like. Ronnie's was always like a superhero physique. Like, you know what? He's the best of all time, but no one else could look like that. You can't look like that. It's impossible. That's just Ronnie. Only Ronnie can look like that. And it wasn't taking anything away from him. It was called genetics plus work ethic plus crazy training in the gym. That's why he'll never be. That's why he will always be the greatest of all time. I don't think you can get all three of those things in one person. Usually there's something missing, Dorian had two of those things. He had the mindset, the training technique. He had good genetics, but he didn't have Ronnie's genetics. He probably made his physique way better than it ever could have been for the average person who had those genetics, because he worked so hard. But he didn't have the natural. Imagine if you have natural genetics to be the greatest of all time, and then you have the work ethic on top of that, and the desire to be the best. Unbeatable. But Dorian, the most impressive in terms of graininess.
Excellent 187. If diuretics are used to remove water, why not use them during your depletion phase?
Because depletion phase is not to get rid of water. The depletion phase is to get rid of glycogen in the muscle. Okay, when you deplete, you get rid of glycogen. When you deplete glycogen in the muscle, water will leave anyway. But that's not why you're doing it, for the water, because when you deplete glycogen, what happens is the body senses that there's not enough of the glycogen producing enzyme in the muscle. So in other words, there's an enzyme inside the muscle called glycogen synthase. And what glycogen synthase does is it takes glucose, sugar, that goes into the muscle, and it stores it as glycogen. Now, as bodybuilders, when we carb load, we want to store as much glycogen as possible in the muscle. But the amount that we store, unlike what Milos believes, is not limited by insulin. It's limited by the glycogen synthase enzyme inside the muscle. Now, how do we get more glycogen synthase? Well, you can't inject it. But what you can do is you can deplete. So when we deplete carbs for 3 days, okay, we basically trick the body into thinking there's not enough glycogen synthase present, and it starts producing more. And it cranks out like a lot more than is normally there. Now, when you start carb loading the last 2 to 3 days, your body can store more carbohydrates inside that muscle cell than it could be before, because it has more glycogen synthase. So we deplete and then carb up, so we have a fuller look to the body than it normally would ever have. You only can get that effect if you deplete carbs. Now, if you're on a ketogenic diet, or a very low carb diet, you're always depleting. So you probably have maximum glycogen synthase in the body. All you need to do is fill up at the end. And that's what I do with a lot of my clients that are on a ketogenic diet. If they're eating low carbs or on a keto, I just have to carb them up for the last 3 days. There's no more, I don't need to deplete them any more than they already are. But in people who are eating a diet that's higher in carbs or, moderate carbs, they need to usually deplete, a couple days out to build up glycogen synthase. So it's not a water thing. You never want to be dehydrated, okay? Because if you use diuretics early in the week, okay, by the time the end of the week comes when you need to get rid of the water, now you're fighting your body. Because what happens is once you start putting diuretics in and the body starts pushing water and salt out, the body says, wait a minute, now we're depleted of sodium. We need to release aldosterone. And so then the adrenal glands crank out the hormone aldosterone. And aldosterone's job is to retain sodium in water. You don't want a lot of aldosterone around when you're trying to get rid of water because it almost makes it impossible to do that. So you don't want to fight aldosterone. The only way to keep aldosterone levels low is to eat salt and drink water the whole night. Then the last day before the show, when you pull out, okay, anything, whether you pull out sodium or you give your body a diuretic that pushes sodium out of the body, what happens? You lose the water. There's no aldosterone around. So your body just gets rid of salt and water super easily. There's nothing, you're not fighting anything. Will not battling anything. And that's the best way to do it. Once you tip your body off, hey, we're getting rid of sodium and water, your body's aldosterone will start going through the roof. That's why guys that eat no salt the entire diet, it's very hard for them to get rid of water at the end a lot of times, because if they eat one piece of food that has salt in it, they retain a ton of water because they're walking around with high aldosterone levels all the time. You don't want that. That's why it's important. That's one of the reasons it's important to eat sodium. The other reason is that your body needs salt for the muscles to contract properly. Otherwise, you're going to walk around cramping all the time. Never restrict sodium except for the last day.
We have a lot of questions about thyroid, so we'll take one of them. It's from McAllister. My thyroid numbers are fine, but the thyroid antibodies are high and almost double the normal range. My doctor said it's nothing to worry about. What are your thoughts? Any concern or ways to lower the antibodies?
If you have high thyroid antibodies, or they call it thyroglobulin antibodies, it means that you have Hashimoto's, okay, which is an autoimmune disease, which is your body's immune system is attacking your thyroid gland. Now, in the initial stages of this, when you first find out that you have these high autoantibodies in your body, a lot of times it can actually stimulate the thyroid gland. So sometimes you go hyperthyroid. Sometimes you actually start producing too much thyroid hormone because the body's basically the immune system is actually stimulating that thyroid gland. But over time, it starts to eat the gland up. It destroys it. So the antibodies actually start neutralizing the gland and destroying it. And then over time, what you notice is you start getting hypothyroid. So you start going low. But you won't be completely hypo. You'll still be producing thyroid. Your levels will be lower than they normally are. And you might have to get a little replacement. And usually the longer you have it, and there's no way to get rid of it, by the way, okay, over time, eventually a thyroid gland gets destroyed completely and you go on replacement, and that usually solves the problem. The good thing about thyroid replacement is it's very easy to replace. It's not rocket science. It's not a very complicated thing that has to be titered. Once they give you T4, your body converts what it needs to T3, the active thyroid hormone, and everything's good. I mean, I had my thyroid gland removed when I had that thyroid cancer in there. I take a dose of 225 micrograms of T4 a day. My body converts what it needs to T3, and all's good in the world. And that's pretty simple. But yeah, I don't have an autoantibody problem. I don't have Hashimoto's. I just had my gland removed. But there are a lot of people out there that have the autoantibodies, and that usually means that eventually, at some point, you're going to have to be on total replacement. A lot of people are just taking a little bit of replacement, initially, and then they're getting their levels checked every 6 months. And then if they get lower, they usually will up your dosage. Usually the gland stops working at some point. In some people, they might go their whole life with only having to take partial replacement. It just depends. But as far as we know now, there is no solution to that problem. In the future, might they come up with some, monoclonal antibodies that might neutralize those autoantibodies? It's possible. I'm surprised they haven't come up with it already. I'm sure there are people working on it, but no one seems to have solved that problem yet.
Take one more question from Precision Workouts. Is it better to blast a few PEDs or better to lower the dose and add more compounds? Is, like, as an example, test mass Tren or test mass Tren and Adderall 50, deca, EQ, etc.?
Yeah, two compounds we've talked about have a synergistic or stacking effect that are much greater than taking one compound. So if you just took testosterone and then you added one anabolic to that, you're going to see way, way better results. If you add a third compound, you get a little bit more. You'll get a little bit more response, not much. That's why in the off season, I usually just use two compounds with people, testosterone with an anabolic. And we'll do that for 6 to 8 weeks. And then we'll switch to another anabolic with testosterone. 3 compounds is probably the most I would mix together. Once you go to 4 and 5 and 6, you don't see any better results. It just doesn't happen. And if anything, if you take too many at one time, then what do you switch to? There's nothing to switch to. So to me, it's silly. Now, pre-contest, the last 6 to 8 weeks, we do use multiple we might use 4 or 5 compounds just because we're trying to hit every little receptor angle we possibly can to try to get every little inch of hardness and we want the physique to look its absolute best, but we're really not getting more growth from doing that. We're just doing it for a cosmetic physical appearance. I mean, if you take halotestin, you're not going to grow from it, but you might store glycogen a lot better, and that's why we take it the last 2 weeks, because you get a harder, fuller, denser look. So you don't go by what we do the last 6 to 8 weeks before a show. If you want to know what potency-wise, building muscle-wise is going to work, 2 to 3 compounds is the most you really should use. And like I said, 2 probably accomplishes what you need. You do two steroids, growth hormone, you're probably good to go at that point. If you can't grow from that, then there's something wrong with your training.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. We have all new episodes of After Hours, which we received the unfortunate news of the passing of Ilya Gollum. Also on the channel right now, we did an interview with Ilya, in person studio interview with Ilya Gollum a few years ago, 4 years ago, actually. It was a very insightful interview. So if you've never actually seen a deep perspective, a real getting to know you, the real story behind Ilya Gollum, go check that interview. We put it back up on the channel. Dave did a little intro as well on it. So go check that out. That's live on the channel, of course. All new episode of Heavy Muscle Radio. Dave, Chris Aceto, and Xavier Wills. Again, if you like what you're watching, hit the like button below, comment below. As always, that's great. Helps our channel, and we appreciate all of your support. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.